Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, and welcome to the InduSoft webinar, Stump the Expert. My name is Fabio Terezinho, and I'll be the host for the webinar today. And as most of you know, the agenda for this webinar is made by you. So there is no predefined agenda. That's an open space for you to write your questions, your comments. You can use the webinar bar on the top of your monitor, either the chat box or the Q&A box, and type your questions, and I'll do my best to answer your questions during the webinar. Just popping up a few initial questions here. First, is it possible to export an alarm database to an Excel spreadsheet rather than a PDF format? So yes, there are different ways to do that depending on the data source of the alarm history. The alarms could be in a history database, SQL database, or in a proprietary text file, but either way it is possible. Just to show really quick at least the basic concepts here, I can create a new project. Create a brand new project here. And first we need to configure InduSoft to save alarm messages to a history repository. Based on the question, you mentioned alarm database, so I assume you're using the external database to store the alarms, like Microsoft SQL Server. So I'm going to connect InduSoft to this database and create a new database here called, let's say, webinar afternoon. Very well. Now from InduSoft, I can link InduSoft to this database. Go to Project, Options, Default Database. This is a SQL Server. Could be Oracle, could be different databases. Define here the server name. Select the webinar afternoon database. Connection succeeded. And here in Alarm, ask InduSoft to save and retrieve alarms from the database. Now here in Alarms, can create an alarm worksheet and tags here like tag A. If it is higher or equal to 1, I want to show the message alarm high message. And I want to save when it's activated, acknowledged, and normalized. Save it. And now I can view the screen. Create a brand new screen. Place a alarm event control object on the screen. Duplicate it, press the Control key and drag, and change the type from online to history. So I can see the history of alarms here as well. And finally, I can create a button here just to simulate the alarms. So every time I click on this button, I will toggle tag A. Change here the caption to tag A equals to, and the value of tag A. So I know when it's 0 or 1. Save this screen, run the application. Very good. So I can simulate the alarm here, online in history, normalize, acknowledge, and I have all this information on the alarm control. And if I go to the database, in my webinar afternoon database, InduSoft created the table alarm history. And if I select information from this table, I have here all the information when the alarm was acknowledged, normalized, activated, normalized, and acknowledged. Now, if I want to export this information to a CSV file, an external CSV Excel file, instead of a PDF, sorry, I can create a script to do that. So I can come here to Main Procedures, Function, Alarm to CSV, for example. function, and use the InduSoft functions to extract data from the database and write this information to a file. So create some variables here like file name, cursor, SQL, row, num rows, and file name, I'll get the path for the application and concatenate with alarmreport.csv. So this will be the name of the report. Then I can create here a SQL statement, select everything from the table alarm history, and I can use this statement, db cursor open SQL, to read data from the database. The first argument for this function is an alias with the name of a database connection. So I can come here in connections, stop the application, and the same connection string I used here to connect to the database, I can use here in tasks, connections, create a connection, in this case with the name DB, and use the same connection string here. So now this function will connect to the database according to this connection string from the connection called DB. If I want to know how many rows were returned by the function, I can use this function num rows, db cursor row count. It's very important to remember to call the function db cursor close after calling the db open cursor open SQL to release the data set from memory. And then I can have a loop for row equals to 1 to new rows. I pretty much define what values, what columns I want to show on the CSV file. So let's say one of them would be alarm start time. So I can create a variable with this name. Let's say another one would be alarm message. So just time and message just to make it quickly here. So I can get this variable, those two variables. This one, I have the function db cursor get value from my query from the column called alarm start time. And the second one is similar, but get the value from the column alarm message. And for each interaction of the loop, I want to call the db cursor next to go to the next record. So this loop loops through all the records in the query from the alarm history database, and now I want to dump this information to the file. So I can use the InduSoft function file write to write here to the file name. In the first column, I want to show the labels, like start time, comma, message. And here, 0 means overwrite the file if the file do not exist anymore, if the append parameter. And here in each interaction of this function, I'll have the file write to the same file name, the value of the variable start time, concatenated with a comma, concatenated with the value of the variable alarm message for each row in the database. And I want to keep appending this file for as many looped interactions as I have. So this is pretty much done. Now I can create a button on the screen to call this function. So change here to VB script. Call this function. And here export to CSV. Save it, run. Here in the output window, on the development environment, I will enable database messages. So if I did something wrong, I should see the errors here in the output window. And I click the button. No messages here. And if I go to the directory of the application, there you go. I have the alarm report.csv. And if I open it, I have the timestamp and the messages. Obviously, it was a quick example. You can change this script and add as many columns as you want. If you want to pass arguments like periods of time and concatenate it to the query to filter alarms in a period of time or by priority, by any other means, you can do that. But this is the main architecture to export data from any database, including the alarm history, into a CSV report that you can open and see in Excel. So hopefully it provided the information you're looking for to export data from the alarm history in a database to an Excel CSV file. Another question, can you show a write once tag in Modbus? The tag is a write-only tag, and rewriting the value causes DO to re-trigger. Not sure I understand. A write-only tag in Modbus. I assume it's a write-only from InduSoft to the device. So here in communication under drivers, you can pick the driver. I'm not sure if you're using Modbus Serial or Modbus TCP or even Modbus Plus, but assuming it is Modbus TCP, you'd use the driver MoTCP. And here in the main driver sheet, you could use your InduSoft tag, like tag called DO, digital output, whatever name you want to give to the tag. The IP address of the device. I do not have a Modbus interface in my computer, but it would be the IP address, colon, the TCP port, colon, the Modbus ID of the PLC, the I/O address. So I'm not sure what address it is, but let's say it's 4x1 holding register 1. And if you want to write only, if you never want to read, or if you cannot read this value for whatever reason, you can use here write. And then, since you are not reading the value back, all you have to do on these screens is, for instance, one button to write the value 1 to this tag. So DO equals to 1. Say set DO. And another one, for example, to reset this tag. Reset DO. Write the value 0. Save. Here I do not have a connection with the PLC, but if I had a PLC with that address, by clicking this button, I would write the value 1, and clicking this button, I would write the value 0. And since here in the driver worksheet, I set the action to write only, I never read the value back. I only write to the PLC. Now, an important concept is when you select here write in the worksheet, InduSoft write values only when this tag changes of value. So if I come here to the screen, and let's say create a rectangle to show the value, the current value of the tag DO. So here in caption, I can write the tag name between curly braces. Save it. If I click on this button, it goes to 1, was supposed to write to the driver. Click this button, 0 was supposed to write to the driver. If I click this button again, InduSoft does not try to write again because the value is already 0. So if I click the button, I keep writing 0, and the driver does not write the value 0 again to the PLC because the value is not changing. If you want to make sure that every time that you click on this button, InduSoft writes the value 0, even if the value of the tag did not change, even if the value of the tag was already 0 before you clicked the button, all you have to do is here in the command configuration, check the checkbox force. So by checking this checkbox, every time that you write a value to a tag in this command, even if the value of the tag didn't actually change, the driver or any other task that is triggered by this tag changing of value will be executed. So the driver will try to write the value 0 every time that you click on this button. I don't know if it helps on what you're trying to do, but this would be a way to guarantee that every time that you click on the button, the value is written to the PLC regardless of changing or not the value of the tag. Another way to accomplish the same thing is to use the InduSoft built-in function force tag change. So the first argument is the name of the tag. So you can use here DO name, returns the name of the tag, and the value you want to write, like I want to write 1. So using this expression, even if it is not in a button, if it is in a background script, something like this, we'll always force this value to be written to the PLC, even if the value did not actually change. So every time I click on this button, the driver will write the value 1 to the PLC, even if the value is not actually changing. So hopefully it answers your question. Another question, can you show how to send and receive string tag contains text? Example, message to modem via GSM via multi-CP driver. Well, there are two different things we can do with string tags here. Once you have a connection, you can communicate string tags with the PLC using the multi-CP driver. And here in the I/O address, you can use the ST prefix to define that you want to write a string. And just to show more details, if you right-click here in multi-CP and go to help, there you go. Then you can come here and define, look for string. Sorry. Here for syntax, and to write a string. See? There you go. You define the string, the record, and the length. So you've got to have an example here. There you go. Address and length. ST, the address, like for instance, holding register 10, colon, and I want to write 5 characters. Sorry, forgot the colon. ST colon 10 and length 5. So I could have a tag here, my str. Create this tag as a string tag. Right here. And by changing the value of this tag, I write this value as a string Actually, each ASC character to 1 byte, starting on the holding register 10, and the 5 subsequent bytes Modbus holding registers, and I write this string to the device using the Modbus driver. That's one way of answering the question if you want to write a string to the actual device. If you want to communicate using Modbus and encapsulate your protocol using a modem, then in InduSoft Web Studio, we have what we call serial encapsulation. So if you're using a GSM modem, most likely your device supports the Modbus RTU driver, Modbus RTU protocol. And here is the Modbus driver, which implements the Modbus RTU or ASCII protocol. You have the option to use serial encapsulation. And if you define serial encapsulation and modem, you can define here the modem that you want to use. Could be a serial modem in one of those serial ports, or could be one of the modems configured in your operating system. So I'm going to define here COM1. And here in connection, you can use an InduSoft tag to trigger a connection for that particular modem. But if you have to send specific AT commands to the modem, we would need to customize the driver or create another driver specifically to send IT commands to the device. Or if you configure the modem on the operating system, you can use the operating system interface itself to configure the IT commands you want to send to the modem. We have a few drivers that are specifically to initiate a communication, sending some specific IT commands to modems, but the multi-CP uses whatever configuration you did when you installed the modem on the operating system level. Another question is, how do you use the read and write trigger and read and write completed in Modbus slave driver standard sheets? When you use the Modbus is a master-slave protocol. So we have both drivers, Modbus and multi-CP, implement the Modbus master protocol, and the ModFL implements the Modbus slave protocol. Now, the difference between the slave protocol and the master is pretty much who takes the initiative to trigger communications. So the master always takes the initiative to write values to the slave or to ask information to the slave. And the slave just responds to the requests or receives the values. Those fields here in the worksheet, read trigger, write trigger, enable read when idle, and write on tag change, are used when you want to initiate a communication. So pretty much when you want to trigger an action to either write a value to the slave or ask the slave for information, read a value for the slave. On the Modbus slave, you never initiate a communication. The master that you're communicating with is supposed to initiate the communication. Either write a value to the slave, to InduSoft, or ask InduSoft for a value. So those 4 fields, read trigger, enable read when idle, write trigger, and enable write on tag change, are not used, they are not applicable for a slave driver, any slave driver, including the Modbus slave. So here in the header, I can say, for instance, holding register offset 0, and have here like tag X, tag Y, tag Z, and addresses, let's say 1, 10, 45. And when you run this driver, it will be listening to a port if you're using TCP/IP, or will be connected to a serial port if you select serial. So here you can define if you want this driver to be RTU or ASCII, and if you want to encapsulate it over TCP/IP or not. here in the Modbus slave driver. In the Modbus slave driver, you can define if the connection should be serial or TCP. So if you define TCP, the driver will be listening to a TCP port. If you define serial, it will be listening to will be connected to a serial port. And the driver will be in standby mode. So it does not, if it is a slave, by definition, it does not start any communication. That's why those fields do not make sense for this driver. So if the master sends a command asking for values for those holding register values, the Modbus slave driver will respond with the values of this tag. Or if the master writes values to the slave to those holding register addresses, the driver will write those values to these tags. Now, the read completed and write completed fields should, if you have tags here, they pretty much indicate messages sent by the driver when it takes the initiative to write something or to read something. So they also do not make sense for a slave. If you want to know, for troubleshooting reasons, whenever the master is requesting data from or writing data to InduSoft, you can use here field read commands, field write commands, or protocol analyzer, and the output window will show you the messages exchanged between the slave and the master. And if you want to know whenever the master writes a different value to those tags, you can use the schedule, for example, to check whenever those tags change of value. But those fields here are pretty much to monitor a master initiating communication with a slave. If you configure InduSoft to be a slave, it is just in standby and receive requests and send the responses automatically to the master. Another question here is, can InduSoft read a J1939 CAN message, break down the message into individual parameters, and save the individual parameters into a data log? Yes, we have done that. We have one driver called CAN. So I'm going to remove those drivers and add the CAN driver to the project. So the CAN protocol, CAN, is a proprietary protocol that implements all the layers of the protocol, including the proprietary layer. So in order to communicate with devices through the CAN protocol, you need a physical adapter for the CAN physical layer. And here in this combo box, there are different adapters that we support, different channels, and here different adapters that we support from Hilscher, PEAK, and the TPC HMI from Advantech. So once you define your adapter, your physical adapter, the driver will implement the standard CAN protocol, and the J1939, just like the CAN Open, are just customizations of the raw CAN protocol. So using the standard CAN driver, you can read and write bytes from the devices using the standard CAN protocol, and then use scripts to parse the values received on those bytes and give meanings to each one of those bytes according to the J1939 specification. So the CAN driver implements the raw CAN protocol, but we have developed different real-world projects to monitor diesel motors and different vehicles that implement the J1939. It does require procedures to parse the values, but it's doable, and we have done it successfully in quite a few real-world projects. So we have another question. How I trigger the email object to send alarm messages when I have an active alarm that have not been acknowledged after the operator adjustable period of time. I think the idea is how to re-trigger the alarm test to send emails after a period of time. If I understood the question, when you create alarm worksheets, for each alarm worksheet, you can enable the option to send emails via SMTP, and you can send text messages as well to your cell phone providers just by defining here the correct syntax, the phone number, and the suffix domain for your cell phone provider. And in InduSoft, you have this field called Send Trigger. So you can think that each time that the tag in the field Send Trigger changes of value, InduSoft looks for all the alarm messages in the buffer of emails to be sent and sends the first one. If it fails, the message remains there. And the next time that you toggle the tag in the Send Trigger, we try to send the first message again. And if it is successfully sent, then it is removed from the buffer. You can configure here the size of the buffer, how many alarm messages could be at the buffer before we implement a FIFO, first in, first out. You can have a tag here, like buffer size, an integer tag. And InduSoft will write in this tag the current size of the buffer, so you can manage and you know how many messages you have in the buffer at any given time. You can have a tag here in the clear buffer, and whenever this tag changes of value, we remove all the messages from the buffer, we delete all the email messages from the buffer, and you can temporarily disable the send regardless of the send trigger. So pretty much you can use your own tag here, send email tag, and use the schedule or a script or a button or any other interface to change the frequency at which you trigger this tag. And every time this tag, each time this tag changes of value, we try to send one message from the buffer to the actual email recipient. So hopefully that covers answers the question that you posted here. Another question is how to use .NET controls and ActiveX controls in InduSoft Web Studio. InduSoft Web Studio is a container for ActiveX controls and .NET controls. And there are different ways to interact with them. You can create a new screen here where you have enough space on the screen. So in this button, it will show all the .NET controls installed in the GAC from this computer. And in this button, ActiveX Control will show all the ActiveX controls registered in this computer, even external ones, like, for instance, the Microsoft web browser. So I can place this control on the screen. I will change the background color from the screen so it is easier to see my ActiveX control itself. In this case, it is an ActiveX control created by Microsoft that works as a web browser like Internet Explorer, but you could host any third-party ActiveX controls. It's very common to use ActiveX controls or .NET controls to display live images from cameras or to play videos, things like that. Now, if you double-click on the control, you can go to Configuration and link tags from InduSoft to properties from this control. You can use tags here as well to trigger methods from this control. Or you can see here the list of events from this control and write the script that you want to be executed whenever the control calls this event, triggers this event. Another way to interact, at least with ActiveX controls or even .NET controls, is by defining a name to the control. Each control on a given screen should have a unique name. InduSoft always gives you a default name, but you can customize, like MB, my browser. And this name is case sensitive. So when you write your script, you have to use the control name exactly as you typed here, the same uppercase, lowercase for the characters. So I can have a button, and if I define the name I gave to the control and dot, InduSoft has IntelliSense and shows you all the methods and properties from that control. So you see that this control has a method called navigate_to, and if I open parentheses or hit space, it shows all the parameters, all the arguments for that particular method. Like in this one, the first one is the URL. So I can define here a URL like google.com, save it, say ActiveX, and run it. And if I click the button, I execute the method, and this web browser shows the Google website in the screen. So using this ActiveX control, you can pretty much show any content that you display in a web browser embedded in your screen. Could be a PDF report, could be a website, could be a web report, an XML file, anything that you can display in a web browser, you could display using this ActiveX control embedded on the screen. Now, for .NET controls, it's quite similar, but instead of just typing the name of the control and the name of the dot and the name of the method, you use a built-in function called xrun, where the first argument is the name of the control, the second argument is the name of the method, and then as many arguments as you need for the parameters of the arguments of the method. And this function would allow you to run a method from a .NET control. Very good. Any other questions? We have one here on how to show or hide the columns from a grid control. So in InduSoft, so let me just write back here, MD, navigate to. Very well. So in InduSoft, we have this grid control, which can be used to display information in a tabular manner. This grid supports different data sources like text files, databases, class tags, and so on. But regardless of the data source, you have here in columns the configuration for the labels of each one of the columns. And you can define here labels like call A, call B, call C, whatever it is. And if I save and run, I didn't link this grid to any data source, so I do not see any data, but you see the columns here with the labels column A, column B, and column C. And I'm going to remove the CAN driver since I do not have an adapter. Very well. So right now, those column names are hard-coded here. You can customize the name of any one of the columns by using tags, a string tag, between curly braces in the label fields. So for instance, call one tag. Create this tag as a string tag, and I can create here on the screen an interface to customize the value of the tag call one tag. So I want to write here the value of call one tag. And every time that I change the value of this tag, I have to tell the grid control to reload the settings again, to update the grid control with the new settings. To do that, all I have to do is to define a tag in the reload field from the grid control and create an interface to change the value of this reload tag, telling the grid control to reload the new settings. So if I save it if I have here in call one tag, let's say machine, toggle, it changes the label of this column to machine. If I change here call one tag to production, toggle, it changes the label to production. And if I change the value of call one tag to an empty string, the grid control automatically hides that column. So you can dynamically hide or show any columns from the grid control just by using string tags between curly braces in the label properties of the columns and manipulate the value of those string tags during the runtime. So that's pretty much a way to show or hide columns from the grid control during the runtime. Let's see if we have any other questions. Here, one, how to insert data into a database from InduSoft. There are many different ways to insert data. You can use the database worksheets, or you can use InduSoft built-in functions. By the way, using built-in functions, you can do much more than just insert data with the database. You can execute virtually any SQL statement, even run global procedures and things like that. So, for instance, I can create here a variable called SQL and define here in SQL the statement create table, my table, and in this table I want to create a column called C1, which is an integer, and C2, which is an integer as well. And if I want to execute this command, all I have to do is define the function dbExecute, the name of my connection, which has the connection string to the database, and the SQL statement itself. So when I click this button, I should create a table in the database. Save it, click on the button, no errors here. If I go to my database here in tables and refresh, I have the table, my table, with the columns C1 and C2. And right now, if I query it, if I come here to my table, select everything from my table, it is empty. I have no values there. So if I want to insert values, so let's say here, insert values, I can use exactly the same function dbExecute, but I change my statement to be insert into my table in the columns C1, C2, values, let's say 10 and 20. Save it, insert values. If I go to my table now, I see the values 10 and 20. And many times you want to insert variable values. Usually the values come from tags themselves. So here in the statement, you can concatenate to your statement variables, tags, or expressions from InduSoft. For instance, I can write here the tag second instead of 20. And here, instead of using the value 10, you can concatenate, for instance, the tag minutes. Could be any tags, could be any expressions, but pretty much each time that I click on this button, I will insert a new record with the value of the tag minutes in the first column and the tag seconds in the second column. So save it, insert, insert, insert. If I go back to the database and execute, I see 45 and 31 seconds, 35, 33 seconds, 45, 34 seconds, and so on and so forth. So it's that simple to insert any data to the database using functions, for example. We have another question. If an email alarm has been sent successfully, can it be resent or it is removed from the buffer? If the alarm has been sent successfully, by default, it is removed from the buffer. So it goes away from the buffer, and it will go back to the buffer only if the alarm is cleared, normalized, and becomes active again. If you want to resend the alarm, let's say to different people, even if the first one was successfully sent, it is possible to do that, but not using this default interface. This default interface is to send alarms only once they are on the buffer. They are sent out and removed from the buffer until they are normalized, cleared, and become active again. If you want to create an escalation process, it can be accomplished. We have done it in applications, but pretty much we wrote scripts to save alarms in a database when they become active. And after a period of time, if they are still active, we pretty much escalate and resend the alarm to another user, and we use the InduSoft built-in function, send alarm next, to send alarms. So we have this function here, send email next, where you can define the subject, where you can define the message and the recipients, the InduSoft.com, for example. And every time that this function is executed, it will attempt to send the email according to the settings that you define in project email. So according to the email settings that you define here. So pretty much you can create a script where every time you have a new alarm, you insert a record. Typically that's the way we do it. Whenever a new alarm becomes active, if it is an alarm you want to send by mail, we insert a record in a table, in a database, and then according to your escalation criteria, check the messages in this database while they are still active and resend them to new users if they have not been cleared, if they have not been acknowledged yet. So if this is the function send email X, that's the function that we use on the script to actually send the emails to different users bypassing or independently from the email settings from the alarm interface. So the email settings from the alarm interface is very, very easy to use. You just fill in the blanks here. And for several projects, that's exactly what the customer wants. If you need more flexibility, if you need something more sophisticated, it is possible to accomplish using the send email X function, and you just define a script to follow the criteria you need. And we have consulting services that can help you to create this script, create this interface in the application for you as well. Very good. Is it possible to send message or alarm by SMS? Very good question, and the answer is yes. In InduSoft, all the alarms are sent via SMTP. However, there are several cell phone providers, as far as I know, all of them, at least here in North America, that allow you to send emails via SMTP, and they automatically convert those emails to SMS messages, to text messages, and forward those messages to the mobile devices, to the mobile phones. So the real question is how to find the suffix to define how you send an email to a particular cell phone, which will be transformed by the cell phone company automatically as a SMS message. And there are, InduSoft itself has done some blogs with those suffixes. I can post it on the webinar after the video, but there is pretty much a list of different suffixes that we use when we send emails via SMS. So let me even check if I have a easy list here. There we go. I have from another project here the list of domain names. So this is the list of domain names. So for instance, if you are sending to a T-Mobile device, the suffix is tmomail.net. So if I want to send a mail, for instance, to my cell phone, I would define 512-736-8252, which is my cell phone, at momail.net. And InduSoft will send an email to this address via the standard SMTP protocol, Simple Message Transfer Protocol, and the T-Mobile provider will transform this email into a SMS message and forward this message to my T-Mobile cell phone. And as you can see here, for different providers, you have different suffixes. For AT&T, is the phone number at txt.att.net. For Sprint, is the phone number at messaging.sprintpcs.com, and so on and so forth, Nextel, and so on. Here, is there a way to view and keep track of who is logged onto thin clients? On the thin client, each thin client has a local tag called username, and this username on each thin client shows you the username for that particular thin client. So it's a local tag, and in each thin client, you can see what's the name of the user for each one of the thin clients. If you want to know on the server the list of thin clients connected to the server, and pretty much the list of usernames for each server, it is possible to do, and we have done it in a few applications, but it requires a small script to be handled by each one of the thin clients. I'll try to demonstrate at least the main concept here. Can create a tag called, for a class, for instance, called thin clients, could have any name, and have here a heartbeat, right? And let's say username. Username is string. Very well. So here in tags, I can create a tag called thin client. Very well. And here in this thin client, I can say is from the class. See thin client, and let's say I have an application for up to 4 thin clients. So I just created 4 instances of the tag thin client. I have thin client index 1, index 2, index 3, and index 4, in addition to index 0, but in this example, I chose not to use index 0. And for each one of those instances, I have the heartbeat, and I have the username. So what I can do on the server, and all the tasks run on the server only, is pretty much, let's use the scheduler. Is a scheduler saying here, once a second, I make the thin client index 1 dot heartbeat to be the thin client 1 heartbeat plus 1. And I do that for each one of the thin clients. Index 2, index 3, and index 4. Index 2, index 3, and index 4. So the server will be pretty much adding those heartbeats and keep increasing them. And we need to define a timeout. Let's say that the timeout is to keep increasing until heartbeat goes to 10. So I disable if the heartbeat is greater or equal to 10. So far what we have done is on the server is to keep increasing those heartbeat values from 1 to 10, and eventually they will all reach the value 10. Very well. Now, here on the graphics script, and the graphics script is executed on the server only, what you do is you can create a variable here, then ID, and create a variable, let's say, my ID. The thin client needs to pick one of those 4 IDs, right? So for ID equals to 1, 2, in this case 4. I keep checking here if thin client index ID dot heartbeat is equal to 10 is because that ID is available. Then I will make my ID equals to the current ID, and I will exit the for loop in if here. So this is pretty much a script to find an available ID for this thin client. So each thin client will run this script and find one heartbeat, one ID where the heartbeat is 10. So I check here, if my ID is greater than 0, so it found an ID because my ID initially is 0, then it's because I found my ID. What I do is I keep resetting the heartbeat so the server knows this particular ID, my ID, is taken, and I make the tag thin client my ID dot username equals to the local tag username. And now it's done. Now if you go to the server, you have this array class thin client 1 through 4, and you have the heartbeat as well. And whenever the heartbeat is lower than 10, you can look at the username tag, and that's the username from that particular thin client. If you want to know more than username, if you want to know IP address, computer name, it's just a matter to add members to this class. So let's say computer name, computer IP, string. So come here to the graphics script, and I say here, computer name is equal to get computer name. And computer IP, I wrote ID should be IP, but just for now, is get computer IP, and so on and so forth. In a more optimized field, the computer name and the computer IP could be done just once, because supposedly they do not change, so they could be here. Once you specify an ID, you set computer name and computer ID, but the username, whenever the username changes, you pretty much update that into the username member of this server tag. So in this array server tag, you have a list of usernames and computer names and computer ID, which are valid for any array position where the heartbeat is lower than 10. Hopefully it answers your question on how to keep track of who is logged into each thin client. And this is if you want to track from an application point of view for the end user. If you just want to troubleshoot, all you have to do is here in the list of, in the tasks bar from Windows, in the tray bar, you right click on the TCP/IP task, go to current sessions, and it shows you all the sections, all the thin clients that, or local clients that are currently connected to the server. So this interface here, if it is just for troubleshooting, you can monitor from this dialog. Just go to the tray bar, right-click on the TCP/IP server, and select current sessions. So another question here. If the provider is not in the list, what to do? I think it's about the question about SMS. I would like to know what is the provider, because we can do a research. This is the result of a research I did a while ago. But if you have a provider that is not on this list, first I'd like to know the name of the provider to look for the same information for that provider, or you can also Google for that yourself. And if that provider does not provide, does not support the ability to receive SMTP emails and transform them into SMS messages, then the alternative would be to use an ActiveX control or develop a driver to do that and develop this based on a particular SMS GSM modem that you have to send SMS messages to your device. But so far, all the providers that we had customers trying with, and that's why this list kept growing. Every time we have a customer with a new provider, we look for the suffix for them. So far, all the ones that we tried, we found a suffix that allows you to send a SMTP message, and they transform that into SMS. But if your provider is not in this list, please let us know. You can send the provider name there or send an email later, and we'll be happy to look for it for you. Very good. So we're a little bit over the 1 hour time. So far, we covered all the questions posted. Let's see. Well, the provider is Bell Canada. I put here in my list, and I will follow up with you with the information about Bell Canada. Very well. So with that, I would like to just show some contact information for InduSoft. You have also my personal information here, my mail address, my cell phone number. If you have any questions, feel free to contact InduSoft support by telephone number. If you go to the InduSoft website, you have email information and all the information there as well, except my personal information, which is available here. And with that, I would like to thank each and all of you for your presence here. Hopefully the webinar was useful and clarified some of your questions. If not, please feel free to follow up with us. Feel free to contact me directly, and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Thank you again for your presence. Have a great day, a great evening, and hope to see you again in the next InduSoft webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.